Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to the show. My name is Danny Guillory. I'm a senior program manager on the configuration manager team, and I'm here with Steve for another episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management. Bring in our guest today.
That's right. Today we have double the topics that we normally have. We have with us first Scott Duffy, who is here to talk about filters, and then we have Mandar Chen here to talk about applications in MEM and app management. Welcome, guys.
What is up? I can't hear y'all. Are y'all there?
I found the mute button.
Oh,
Hey, Steve. Hey, Jenny. Hey, guys.
hey, what's up?
Thanks for having us.
No, no problem, no problem. I'm glad you guys could join. Lots of questions about these two topics all the time,
Yes.
right? We can't have any type of conversation with customers without talking about at least applications and filters and many other things. But all top of mind for customers is apps, filters. How do they do X, Y, Z, right? Get into the cloud. So, Scott, I'll paper rock scissors. I'm just guessing in my head. I'll let you go first. Let's hear what you got with filters. What's going on?
So filters, right? So I work as a PM on grouping and targeting in MEM. So part of that is grabbing AAD groups and targeting to them. But filters is the next layer on top of that. So groups are great. You've got this bucket of users or devices to target. But filters is kind of like a layer under that lets you be really granular with that targeting. So the key example for filters is now you can target like your all users or all marketing users or all engineering users group, but then use filters on top of that to say, I only want to apply this policy or app if those users are on corporate devices. So if they're using their personal enrolled devices, no, forget about it. Don't process that policy. Only corporate devices. And there's lots of granularity to building these filters out.
Cool.
So, Scott, keep me honest. I've been using this analogy with customers who, trying to understand the relationship of filters with other methods of grouping and targeting, like AAD groups. And I basically tell them, okay, so this is kind of analogous to the on-prem world where we would use AD groups for targeting, but then we would also leverage for more granular targeting things like WMI queries
Right.
or other
Well,
methods. This is just kind of a cloud equivalent of that fine tuning. Am I being honest?
yeah, that's exactly how I see it in my head too. You target to like an OU and then beyond that you have filtering. You have like security group filtering. You have WMI filtering. You have within item level targeting. There's filtering. So it's just that next layer of granularity, and it's just controlling the applicability at pretty much in real time when we're talking about device check-in, whether this policy app should be served up or not.
So as you go through the filters, right, or like, as I go through the process, how you got filters basically on everything. So how was that working with the different teams? And it's one of the things reason I was kind of thinking about Mandar on the show too, right? Because you go through an app, you go through assignment, and guess what? There's another button that says filter. So did you guys collaborate? Like how did that work? I mean, you probably had to talk to a bunch of people with everywhere that filters in. You had to have talked to a ton of people, right?
You know I did, Danny. so um, so I'll correct you and say that filters is not yet complete across all workloads in
Okay.
the console. That you will notice one or two areas where it hasn't yet integrated for
I,
various
I
reasons.
own I own one of those gaps.
And this is still in public preview as well. And so I'm hearing a lot from customers about, oh, when's this workload coming, so on and so forth. But you're right, this is purely what we call a horizontal feature across the console. There's this filtering framework, this engine, and then working with lots of my peers like yourself to go and integrate this thing within various workloads. Lots of fun. I owe lots of people lots of presents for their help and assistance along the way.
So Mandar, how much of a hard time did you give Scott when he came to you and say, "Hey, I need to put filters in the app model"?
I think I was told by my manager to work with Scott, so we had a pretty good time. I would say I learned quite a bit from Scott. I remember when Scott first started on the filters work, I was still kind of like a new PM, so I was able to look into how that work is being done horizontally, and I think I think customers are going to be really happy with the work that Scott's done.
Yeah, and I'd say Mandar had a really difficult area as well. Win 32 apps, lots of complexity there, lots to think through, lots of scenarios. So but yeah, Mandar's a champ for that.
All right, so
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
I guess whichever one of you guys want to go first, and maybe go 100 level, one 200 about your feature. I'll let you guys can pick. Doesn't matter to me.
Scissors, paper, rock. Well, I'm primed here to start sharing. So let me go ahead and share. I think if for the folks that have not seen filters or this concept is new, I think the demo is really probably the best thing to kind of start to demonstrate it and walk through it. So I'll spend a few minutes on that if
Go
that's
for
okay.
it. You are on the big screen. Your demo's up.
Cool. It's coming through. So as I was saying, filters a layer on top of group assignments, and the first thing that you'll need to do is create this filter object. So you create this object once for a specific purpose, and then you can reuse that across multiple assignments. So your app deployment, your policy deployment, and then other workloads as well. So if we were to just build out, a simple scenario with filters, if I had a scenario where I want to do some targeting, but I only want, maybe even some user-based targeting, but I only want to hit corporate iPads of those users, I could get a filter like that. So I could call this corporate iPad. I'd choose my platform here of iOS and iPad OS. And then I would use this filter builder to go ahead and do that. And you'll notice this is pretty similar UI and look and feel and rule syntax is what folks are used to with dynamic Azure AD groups. So I'm going to build this out. So the model is going to contain iPad, and the ownership is going to equal corporate. So now I've got this rule that is going to basically collect corporate iPads. And so I can complete the creation of that. Now I've got this filter that's corporate iPads. Now if I want to deploy an app to only corporate iPads, I can go ahead and do that. So if I grab one of my existing apps here, this one isn't assigned, so I'll go ahead and do that one. I will go to assignments. Okay, and so now I can add a group, or I can add the all users group just for being fast here. But I can additionally, on top of it, add filters. And you can notice that there's kind of 3 modes here. I can either choose to include my corporate owned iPads, or I could use it in exclude mode as well if I wanted. So if there was a scenario where I wanted this to hit all iOS devices except the corporate owned iPads, I'd use it in exclude, but most frequently customers want to use it in this include mode. So you start with your scope, which is your all users in this case, and then there's a specific subset of that scope that will have this app installed, and that'll be the ones that match this criteria here. And this experience is the same across the other workloads as well. So if I went to a policy, or if I went to other workloads, I could go through, add a filter on top of that assignment.
Awesome. That looks great. Like, I mean, wow, something that has been asked for quite a bit, right? For a long time. So how long did it take to get this from idea to conception, or at least get it to where it is today?
It was a fair while in the making, and even before I came onto the project, there was a lot of planning that had gone into this and a lot of horizontal work. I want to say it's about a 2-year process for the filters. That's a really long time.
Steve, any questions in the chat yet we want to get to about filters?
Yes. One of the first questions from Johannes. Will filters support filtering on hardware or software that is on the device? Like, can we use hardware parameters, or can we have, like, I assume the question's prerequisite software that might exist on the device?
Yeah, so the starting point for filters is like we have to have the data in the Intune inventory, right? It's something that we have to collect, have to know, has to be stored with the device in Intune. So there is kind of, I don't know, I want to say hundreds of device properties currently when you go to the device blade in MEM, and you can see all the different things that, there's lots of good stuff there that customers are always asking to use on filters. And it makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. So we do have plans to expand out the supported properties. That's something that we're going to work towards. And right now it's a case of prioritizing firstly, getting all the features in for our GA, and then prioritizing the other properties and adding them iteratively over time.
Stefan's here. Awesome. This one's probably for both you and Danny. Will we be able to use filters with config manager devices inventory data, have better scoping, and to avoid having to sync config manager collections to Azure groups?
You want to take that,
Stefan.
Danny?
I was trying to pretend that my camera was frozen, but I'm messed up now. So yeah, there is plans definitely for me and Scott to definitely partner together to bring filters in. I would like to tell you I had an actual ETA on that, but I really don't. It is on the radar and things that I have a feature right now that has a gap. And as Mandar said, our managers have basically came to us and said filters needs to be in pretty much everything that we design. So before we can, at least our mandate, at least from my direct is, hey, before we could GM feature, it has to have filters in it. So thanks Scott for like making such a great thing that we got to like literally include into everything. So yeah, do we have plans to? Yes, me and Scott just need to find time to pick our head up above water and get it done. Scott, you can add anything else you need.
I was going to just say, let's be clear, Scott didn't make this. Some really, really awesome developers working in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team made this, and they let me talk about it.
Now that's a classic guy, right? I just gave him all the credit. It's like I don't want it all.
So let me make sure I'm hopefully I'm grokking the question that just came in. If a filter breaks or goes away, does it apply to all users, or is it designed so it can't do that? I think they're asking, what are the ramifications of like filter removal, or if there's.
Yeah, this is definitely a scenario we had to think through in planning. There is an experience. Basically, short answer, you can't delete a filter while it's still in use somewhere. So we require you to go and clean up any of those assignments, do deletions of the assignment before you can go and delete the underlying filter object. It's just, we built in for that reason.
And then another great question that came in here. Are there any plans to allow script-based filters? For example, would it be possible to have a PowerShell script determine the filter?
Oh, like a dynamic execute this script first and then decide whether to apply the policy. It's not something that we've thought about at this point. I guess it's kind of similar to the Win32 app dependency check, right? Yeah, no, we haven't thought about it. The architecture of filters isn't client side. We do this. It's an evaluation library that's built into the check-in services before we decide to send down policy. So it's not something, we're not really running any scripts on the device to figure out applicability. It's all kind of server side.
Cool. I have one more question, and then I guess let's get some apps information that we can circle back around to bring it all together towards the end. How'd you guys envision Graph API, Scott? Like, what if a customer wants to create a filter with Graph? Is that available for them to do. I guess what I'm actually thinking of is those very large customers that we work with, and they may want to do things at scale. I kind of can see like saying that out loud, probably. Why would I want to create filter at scale? But I don't know. I'm sure somebody's going to ask it, and I figure, hey, let's just get it out there now.
Yeah, I think I want to say all features that you see in the console are supported in Graph API. Filters is no different. We actually worked with some of the folks that on creating some scripts for filters that are based on Graph API. So one of the things that you'll notice, for now, is that there's no UI to like look at a filter object and then see everywhere that it's used across the console. So that's something that's not there in the console today, but there's a script to do that in the Intune script repository. So yeah, Graph API is supported. There's a couple of use cases for it today. But yeah.
Cool. All right, so I'm sure we're gonna have some more questions about filters come in. I want to give Mandar the mic right now, and Mandar, tell us about apps. What's going on? What we got today, and what have you been working on?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I think Scott did a lot of great work in filters, and I hope I could do equally as good work in the apps. But as you guys know, that there's a lot of stuff going on in apps right now. It's probably one of the hottest areas where there's a lot of features that a lot of customers want. So we've been working pretty hard for the last year and the past 2 years on them. So I kind of created like a deck that kind of talks about it, and then I can also show a demo as well that I've been preparing as well. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Go. Okay.
And
Cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Perfect.
Sending it live right now, and yep, everybody's got you.
Perfect. Okay. So I did something that's a little bit more, I guess, applicable to the current work from home type of situation right now. But there's kind of 3 stories that we really want to address from the app's perspective. The first story that we want to kind of talk about is, admins want the ability to kind of keep all the apps up to date and monitor their status, right? Especially this becomes a little bit more important when everyone's working from home. And you really need to make sure that people are productive and using the apps that they really want, and it works, and being able to track that. The second story that we want to kind of satisfy is that customers and admins want to essentially monitor all the apps on all their corporate devices, right? To see what's exactly going on, what apps everyone has installed, right? Are there any potential vulnerabilities that they need to address, or licensing issues and things like that? And so that becomes a very, very hot topic for us that we want to tackle as well. And finally, the last story they want to tell, especially important from a work from home perspective, is that admins want the ability to kind of deploy apps the way that they want to, right? There's no friction, and it just works. And so I think just from what we have right now, these are the three main points that we want to tackle from apps perspective. And so with the first story, keep all the apps up to date and monitor status. We kind of have the feature that's in public preview 1 right now called App Supersedence, and I think probably a lot of you have played with the feature already. And so we made a lot of progress since the first public preview, and just a reminder of what we have currently is that right now, as part of the first public preview, customers can essentially supersede their applications, and supersede is really just a fancy word for update or replace. And then customers could build these long and beautiful supersedence chains where a series and rows of apps and in multiple versions are supersede one after the other, and it really just works. And it's a very, very simple thing that customers can do, and they don't have to go and remove the app in their own accord or in their own methods. They could just essentially use app supersedence to do that, and it's one seamless step. And I'll show you a demo right after this as well. And so the good news is that we've been working very, very hard on public preview 2, and we're introducing a bunch of new features that customers are asking about. So for example, better integration with dependencies, right? So you can think about the scenario of what happens if you supersede your application with dependencies, right? What would happen then, right? Should the dependencies be inherited? Should they be deleted? So that's kind of the problem that we want to address and make sure that we have something that's intuitive for customers. The second part is improved reporting, right? So making sure that we're reporting the right statuses at the right times, and also potentially showing customers, like this beautiful graph of all the supersedence relationships between their applications. And finally, we're also making a lot of progress on integrating better with ESP as well. So without further ado, I will switch over to my demo, which is here. Can everyone see my screen?
We got you.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So this is we're kind of in the app creation set of steps, and right now you go through the configuring the metadata, detection rules, requirements, and whatnot, and you hit the supersedence stage, and this is clearly in preview right now. And we're trying to make this as simple as possible, but essentially when you create the application, you can essentially say this application could supersede, like any application that you select, right? So let's say we just select a random application. It gives you some basic information like publisher and version, and then you could decide whether or not the supersedence flow should go and uninstall the previous version. And so what this really means that if it detects the previous application, it would just uninstall it for you. Sometimes we know that customers have apps that would, when you run the installer of an app, it would just uninstall the previous version automatically. So you have the option to kind of toggle yes or no for this. And I think the good thing about this is that an application could potentially update or replace multiple applications as well. So we can just throw, another 2 or 3 different applications in there, and then do the configurations that we want and do the modifications that we want as well, right? And then so once you do that, I don't think there is I think there is a pretty high limit in terms of how many applications that you can actually do this to. So you can essentially play around with it and have fun with it for quite a bit. And then afterwards it will be the standard assignment flow. And so once you do the assignments, the supersedence is where it happens. Switching back to, I guess, the next topic. So that's kind of supersedence. Let me see if I could maximize screen again. Yeah. I think the second story that we want to tell is kind of monitor all the apps on all their corporate devices. And so this one we're starting thinking about like app discovery and app inventory. And right now we have the discover apps that's being offered right now, and we're doing a lot of work in this area to make sure that we deliver more apps and showcase all the apps in the ARP list that you have on your devices. And this is probably one of the biggest customer complaints that we've heard about in the last 2-3 years. So we're doing a lot of work on that right now, and I think you guys will be very happy very, very soon. And I think the second part that we're doing is we're kind of increasing app collection frequency for MDM app inventory from every 7 days to every 24 hours. So what that would happen is that all your apps would essentially be collected every 24 hours, and you would know exactly what's on every single app on your IT estate. Well, probably not every single app, but majority of it on your app estate on a daily basis. And then we're probably going to do some export capabilities, so you can export that data and then play around with it however you want. So that's kind of the work we're doing in that front right now. And finally, the last story is probably the most simple, is essentially being able to deploy apps the way that customers want to. And so right now, something that we're working on, and it's soon going to be in private preview, is that admins can essentially deploy apps to the company portal with the device context. And this is more for multi-user devices or devices with no user affinity. Essentially you deploy an app to a school, for instance, and 30 kids will be able to get that without logging in or anything like that. So we're pretty happy about the work that we're doing on this front as well to address some of the multi-user scenarios. So that's kind of the 3 stories that we want to tell from apps perspective, and I'll probably leave the floor open to you guys.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, I completely spaced out and was actually paying attention to everything you said. Steve, is there any questions in the chat that obviously I was not paying attention to?
We have a lot of questions actually, and so
oh wow, okay,
yeah, this is a really hot topic. So
yes,
and we seem to be getting a lot of interest in the company portal app as well. So we'll go back and start with the first one. We're new to MIM, and we're interested in knowing if users are able to uninstall apps from the company portal. We see install buttons and reinstall, but no uninstall buttons on apps in Intune. Just wondering, is it us doing something wrong, or is that feature not supported, only for co-managed apps in the company portal, but not Intune, etc.? So what's the deal on uninstall apps from the company portal?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think app uninstall is something that I personally a lot. And if I could prioritize it immediately, I would prioritize it immediately and get that shipped. So I would say is that it's very much on our radar, and it's one of our top priorities actually. That's coming up next. So we want to essentially be able to introduce not only uninstall but also reinstall as well within the company portal. I think it's that's something that's definitely on the roadmap, and I think the customer is definitely right in terms of wanting that feature, and I think it's a very, very important feature for us to have as well.
So anonymous, it's not you. It's So here's another great question. Thanks for doing this session. Y'all are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully a relevant question about applications. Why isn't there an uninstall button for company portal for Win32? Okay, I should have read that first, but same answer there. Yes. Here's one from Johannes. Any plans to allow separate content or even no content for install, uninstall for Win32 applications?
So separate content and no content. I think I've heard that once before, but I'd like to probably get a little bit more detail on what that means.
We can make that happen. Don't worry about that, Mandar. We can make that happen.
Okay.
Yep. Stefan again, will we be able to set Win32 app requirements and detection methods directly in the UI instead of having to attach PowerShell scripts?
Yeah, so I think that's another request that we've heard before. It's definitely on our radar. I think right now there are a couple of other things that we're considering from a requirements perspective and setting specific requirements. I could definitely take a look at the specific requests and maybe it's something that we definitely talked about before.
Stefan is loaded for bear today. He's got the questions coming in. This one is device targeting related. Will we be able to make apps available per device and not just with users?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was
yes, we
slide 2, wasn't it? Slide 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was our third story, essentially being able to make apps available from a device context perspective. So that's something that
so that's probably
yeah.
And then again, another uninstall question on the company portal. So we answered that. And let's see. If a required app is set as superseding, it takes much longer to deploy and is not included in autopilot, even though it's required. I think that's more of a comment than a question. So
I think that's a great comment, and I think we've actually done a lot of work for it. That we're preparing for better integration with autopilot for public preview too. So do expect it to be a lot more better and seamless when we come out with public preview too.
Johannes has a question. Any plans to make supersedence work for apps that are deployed as available?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I think from day one, we definitely want supersedence to work really well with both required and available scenarios. I think the focus initially that we decided to do is required, simply just because vast majority of our users use required deployments, and we expect more of them to use supersede required applications and whatnot. But yeah, we do plan to do a lot more work on the available front. And so when you supersede available applications, the new one would essentially pop up in the company portal and whatnot. And so we're also looking at some other stuff as well. So for example, I'll upgrade if if an application is installed in the company portal and they click install, is there a way to potentially just automatically upgrade the application for the users that installed it? So that's an area that we're looking very, very deeply into as well.
This one kind of shifts back towards filters real quick. Stefan asked, will there be a preview button to see how a filter works with specific assignments, kind of like Config Manager collection preview, if that doesn't already exist?
That's a great question, and we are working on some stuff that's coming out really soon to help with that. So just like for better context for everyone, we heard this feedback a lot was when you're like, we walked through that filter creation flow when we started defining all the rules. A lot of customers, a lot of IT pros gave feedback that it feels like a bit of a black hole because you're not quite sure if your rule is going to work, and then like in the next step I assigned it to all users, right? and if you got it wrong, then the app gets installed on all users' devices. So we are working on something to come out really soon to address that, such that in the authoring flow you have greater confidence in the scope of devices that you can hit with that filter rule. So short answer, yes. Long answer, I get.
And then here's an interesting one. Are there any considerations being made to shift the filter evaluation client side, like global conditions in ConfigMan?
Right now, no, we're not looking at any client side filter evaluation. I guess I suppose we start with the requirements and like what do we need to do, and then architecture comes in, and so far the server architecture has been favorable. The server side compute filters. I didn't mention that basically when this project started and when we were looking at the ways to solve this problem, there were lots of different solutions and architecture before, but where we landed with this with filters and the component, it is essentially a really, really fast performing filter evaluation. So it's not like it adds any load or any latency to policies coming down. It's something that's built into the device check-in and is really, really super fast. And we measure it in microseconds in terms of evaluation. So the server-side processing is doing everything we need it to do at this point.
So is there any kind of difference when you compare dynamic groups with filters in terms of evaluation and population of the there with dynamic groups in Azure AD, there's an evaluation cycle and a population delay. How do filters differ in that capacity?
Yeah, so we didn't get to this too much at the start, but it's pretty common knowledge for most folks that work with Azure AD dynamic groups that these they're not instant, right? Like you create a dynamic group with some rules, and then devices will be populated into that group over time, and it's not not like that. The problem that folks were having with MEM and dynamic groups was to do with the timing, right? So like you create a dynamic group that says, I want all of these devices with this specific name prefix to be in the group, like all the devices that start with iPad, for example. And so you enroll a device into MEM, and then to create this group, so first the device needs to enroll, and then Azure AD needs to know the device's name. Azure AD needs to put it into this device group. Azure AD needs to tell MEM, and then the policy targeting has to come down. So that round trip can take some time, first to create the dynamic group and then send down all the policies. And we had that. The typical feedback would come is that, well, after devices enroll, it takes 30 minutes for policies and apps to come down, and that's not good enough because it's my users have the device at that point. So that was actually one of the requirements, or one of the things that we wanted to solve with filters, and that's why it's so fast and dynamic. So now instead of the dynamic group, in certain scenarios, you can just replace that dynamic device group with a filter, and know that at enrollment time and that very first check-in, the right filtering will happen. So, if we take, for example, like a user iPad type scenario, the user enrolls the iPad. They ask Intune, what are all my policies and apps? Please give them to me. And then during that very first enrollment and check-in, we can do filter evaluation dynamically right there and then. So end result, policies and apps get delivered faster in that case.
And then there was another question on uninstall in the company portal. I get the feeling people want uninstall in the company portal.
You know what? I actually used to work in the apps team with Mandar, and this was an ask back then and something that we were driving towards as well. So I feel hot seat at this point.
Yeah. So question, kind of for both of y'all, and I want you to elaborate on what would you give a customer as kind of guidance, dare I use the word best practices? Like, how do they get started with using both of y'all's perspective areas? And I always regurgitate to looking from the lens of when I was on the other side, right, as a customer, is I'm always managing risk, right? So I want to hear a few words of like wisdom, guidance on both of you guys. How do our customers get started and always continue to know that they're not going to, how do they do it safely, right? Without, oh, hey, driving home at 5 o'clock and here's 400 help desk tickets because things just went completely south on them. So give us some guidance on how to get started there.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead first. So filters is, I think anyone can opt in to use filters. It's in public preview right now. When you go to that filter page that I showed before, there's a button and you can opt in to use it. And that action alone is not going to do anything. It's essentially just going to allow you to use create filters in your tenant and then use them on assignment. So totally not a destructive act or anything to be worried about. So that's where you get started, and then the best practice, or my recommendations for trying these things out would be obviously to either start in your test tenant, your lab, or on a smaller scope. So if you create a filter, you filter in an assignment for, say, your test users or just your user account, see how it works, how devices are being filtered in, filtered out. Get familiar with it before going and applying that on one of those really large virtual groups, like all users or all devices. I think the second kind of recommendation isn't really like a get started thing. It's more a question that I get asked a lot about filters. Like, how do I think about filters with Azure AD groups? And should I migrate from Azure AD groups to just using filters? And my general guidance there is that targeting in MEM is to Azure AD groups, right? Like that's what you target, that or the virtual groups, and you should start there where you can. And then filters is a layer on top of that for increased applicability and control. There are certain cases where it makes a lot of sense to use the all devices virtual group in Intune instead of an Azure AD group, and that's to get around some of the latency issues, especially for userless scenarios. But my general guidance there is to start with a group, assign to a group, and then use filters as kind of an applicability layer.
Gotcha. It's good info. Mandar, what about you?
Yeah, so I think getting started is pretty straightforward because some of the stuff that I was talking about essentially just kind of happens, in the backgrounds. For example, some of the Discover app stuff and the work that we've been doing from a app inventory perspective, that kind of just happens. If you go to the Discover apps, you should automatically see it. Probably not today, but when we do release it to the public, you'll probably see it. You'll probably also see the 24-hour app inventory collection, and you'll start to see some of the apps, additional Win32 apps starting to flood in that you see in the ARP list. So that part, it happens in the background, and no one really needs to worry about anything. which is great. I think with app supersedence, as we start to release and do public previews, you'll see it as when you configure your Win32 applications, and there's that step that very, very simple and straightforward. You just add your applications and which one it wants to supersede, and basically it would just happen. And so I think my recommendation with that is also very, very similar to Scott's, which is, doing a test tenant first, make sure that the behavior is exactly what you want, and make sure that there's no issue with it, and then slowly start to roll out, because it's such a powerful feature when with some of the bigger enterprises out there. Like if you do one supersedence, relationship, potentially that's going to update or replace the apps on like hundreds of thousands of devices. So that's the impact is really, really large. So start with a test tenant for sure. And I think finally with a device-based deployment work, essentially that's pretty seamless as well. It would just happen in the available intent. You just essentially select the device group and then deploy available to it, and it should just work when we release it. So I think my areas tend to be pretty straightforward in that regard, which is good. But I think that's probably the one advice I would give.
Awesome. Steve, any other burning questions out there?
I often wondered I remember when Scott was working on this stuff, and before we made it public, and I wondered this too in the back of my mind, how many customers would gravitate towards this next question here. Would it be better than dynamic groups at all, just to use the all users and devices group plus filters instead? Would you want to then use filters completely and move completely away from dynamic groups going forward?
So it's up to the scenario, I think, is my best answer for that. There's cases where groups are going to be better. Like groups, filters are not groups, right? Groups have owners. They're a bucket of users or devices that you can see, that you can assign role-based administration to. They have a lot of other uses, and filters will never be that, right? They're a dynamic applicability at the point of check-in. So they are different. There is definitely, as I mentioned, some scenarios where an all users or all devices assignment with just a filter makes a lot of sense, and that's the area that I think that they are really useful for is when there's something that's latency sensitive. So the scenario I gave before was enrollment time. If you have a requirement to deploy some userless devices out there, and the moment that they enroll, you want to assign to all devices and then have them dynamically decide whether they're applicable for this policy or not. That's a good use case. But then a user-based scenario, you're going to target at a user group and then use filters on top of that user group assignment. So it really depends what the scenario is and what you're trying to get out of it. They're not groups. There's going to be some differences. There's differences as well in kind of the supported properties. There's a lot of considerations there. So I wouldn't say you should go replace your groups with filters. I think there's a few scenarios where they definitely make sense. A lot of customers that I talk to just have that one common scenario that they only want to apply to corporate devices. And so they look at all of their user-based group assignments at the moment and then say add a filter to only apply on corporate devices.
I have a question. And
go for it.
I feel like I'm walking the plank here, but I feel like other people may be thinking the same thing. So I'm just going to ask it. Like, if I have Azure AD groups, I guess I want to make sure that I'm thinking about it correctly, right? I'm learning here too. The mem, when you say like deploy to all groups, all users and groups, that feels like just being a config man guy, right? What have we told people not to do, right? Don't deploy to all systems. So like when you say that and then go put a filter on it, it feels awkward. But I also want to just thinking about the broader picture, mem and all the different other things that are part of let's say Office 365, the whole stack, right? All the security tools. If you do the grouping based off the filters, then what if you go into another cloud product and you want to target? I mean, the filters exist in MIM, right? And hey, if you stop using the dynamic groups in Azure AD, what other things you may impact outside of Endpoint Manager Admin Center, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but that's what makes sense to me, right? Because I'm a nerd like everybody else, and we poke at other products, and we may not go deep into it, but I notice when I go into other products, let's say security tools, I see the Azure AD groups I built. I don't see the filters, but the filters are amazing when you talk about the perspective of MIM, the device manager area. So if I'm wrong, correct me, but that's what came to my head.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, groups are kind of the backbone across all 365, Microsoft 365, and they're the targeting unit. And filters is just a MEM specific layer of applicability for the enrolled devices.
Good. Sorry, I don't want to take over the show. I just wanted to put that out there in case somebody else was thinking like I was thinking.
Yep. And you know, the all devices thing, I think that this will, you know, folks will feel a lot better about assignments like that when they have the ability to preview devices or understand what the bucket of devices is actually going to be.
Cool. All right, let's take, I don't know, 3 or 4 more questions. We got enough time for, I guess, 3 or 4 more, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think we've gone through them, but I'm really surprised that a certain question was not asked, to be honest with you. And I'm debating whether I should ask it or not.
Go for it.
I think I know what it is. Is it for me?
It's not for you, Scott, actually. It's actually for Mandar. So Mandar, I just went to my Store for Business portal. And I see that it says Microsoft Store for Business will be retiring in the first quarter of 2023. For customers who are currently syncing their apps with the Microsoft Store for Business, and which may just be a few. Like, for example, a lot of our customers use the Store for Business for Company Portal, for the Whiteboard app is a really popular one as well. There's a couple of others in there that I see being commonly used. And then they're doing that alongside of their Win32 apps. What should they be planning for in the next couple of years? Or is there anything that you can possibly shed light on or talk about?
Yeah, so I think since this was announced, I feel like I could talk a little bit more about it. But obviously, we're working on like a replacement, from a Intune side perspective, right? Like there's a repository that essentially we're building that would include a lot of the applications that's kind of in the Store for Business, and essentially customers could use the repository within Intune and deploy the applications to the devices and keep them up to date and whatnot, and do all the other fun things they want to do, such as assignments and requirement rules and configuring metadata. So that's kind of the large gist idea. I think there are some smaller details that we're probably still currently hammering out. So for example, how do you get Company Portal onto like the devices and whatnot? So some of the stuff are definitely kind of in the discussion, but obviously I think wherever we do ship is going to be aimed at a better replacement for the Store for Business.
So there's no need to panic. There's
no need to panic. There's absolutely no need to panic.
All right. I guess Steve, take a last look at the questions. If we're good on questions, we can wrap it up. Give people some time back.
I think we're good. Absolutely.
Last parting words from our 2 guests.
Well, thanks for having me. For everyone out there who hasn't tried filters, go try it out. Let me know how it goes. If you do discover anything or have any questions, there is actually on our docs site, there is a link to provide feedback, and the team and I review this really regularly. We're really interested in feedback and how people's experiences are and what they're hoping to get in the future. So if you haven't tried it, go do it and let us know how it goes.
Cool. Mandar?
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. But yeah, definitely play around the features and keep on giving us the feedback for the app area. I know there's probably a lot to say right now, but hopefully some of the work that we're doing will alleviate a lot of the problems that admins are facing today with apps. And we're always open to feedback and improving our features. So yeah, just keep on
All
using
right,
it.
well, I just want to say thank you both. I mean, both y'all are great peers. I respect both y'all and all the work y'all done. Even before I came into the inner circle of the PM team. So um, really appreciate both y'all's work. It's great work. That's why I came to the inner circle. So Steve, anything?
My sentiments exactly. I think Danny. I think it's a great idea having more than just one
I know,
person.
right?
We should possibly keep this going. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks again, guys. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a good day. Stay safe. Y'all have a good one.